where that series of movies, it's like first they were like, yeah, we're gonna be like kind of horror but kind of comedy. No, 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 we're going all in on the horror, and then you're like, no, never mind, we're gonna like go way into the comedy. Senator Cookie says, I'm a writer and I will double down on the cheesy and corny. Oh, absolutely. That's actually one. So, Urban Girl, that's actually one of the things I really appreciate with the Evil Dead series, like Evil Dead 1, 2, and then Army of Darkness. I appreciate that as well as ones that people argue which one's the best of them. And it's entirely depending on like where they are on the spectrum of like the horror to like the cheesy comedy and all that kind of stuff. Like what their preferences are. And I do like that like all their movies actually do pretty well because people have different amounts of each they want. But like for example, when I was a kid growing up, my favorite so far is like the superheroes and all that. Like I was big into X-Men. That was my go-to. Batman, Superman, all that cool, fine. Like I enjoyed those, but it was like X-Men was the big one. But even then, for a while there, they're making a bunch of X-Men content. Like I could actually do with less X-Men, or I would rather instead of just following Wolverine and Cyclops and these handful around everywhere, if we could just get like again the B-lister superheroes. Like give me some Jubilee. Like make her one of the ones they do around. Just because like, hey, this is or like Morph. If anyone remembers Morph. Like follow these characters around, like all these B-list ones that you don't know about much, because there's already plenty of content on the other ones. Like if I want to hear just, Wolverine's story, there is no shortage. Yeah, more Gambit. I think Flash is an example of too cheesy. I haven't seen the Flash one. One was too underdeveloped. Two was one but better budget, and Army of Darkness was just comedy. Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned, I'm not huge into horror movies, which is why like I like Army of the Darkness the most out of them, because I am super into like the comedy side of it. So that was a movie that more catered to my preferences. I like them all, but yeah. Yeah, Senju goes, Batman was my favorite and still is. I think my problem is Batman has changed so many different ways over the years that, like, no matter what you wanted Batman to be, some of Batman is going to be counter to that. I at least appreciate with some of the Batman series that they've either done like twists where they followed other characters. Like I mentioned, I really enjoy the Harley Quinn as the cartoon Harley Quinn. Like I really enjoyed that Batman series because it's just following very, very different Batman characters. Like because Harley Quinn was hugely popular in the Batman animated series. Like that's where Harley Quinn like first really debuted, and just everyone was like, I love this ridiculous lady. And I'm glad that they like actually fleshed out her story and kept adding to it and all that. Hey, Gravy, how's it going? Versus like when you look at Superman, there's so many characters that Superman has that are like secondary characters that they never get their day. Yeah, and so many of Harley's like one-liner throwaway lines that you're just like excellent. Yeah, I didn't care for the movie Suicide Squad. It's like that's fine. Like I didn't care for New Joker. Then I'm like that's Like you've made a clown person who is supposed to be Joker, but is a completely different character. Like, you put them in the same location Joker belongs, but is a completely different character. And in my opinion, not in the best way. Like, I do feel there's a place for a villain like that villain that they had put there, but it shouldn't have been, they just, you know, cashing in on the Joker name. Like, it should have been just a different new villain. I mean, in my opinion, the best Joker ever was the Batman animated series, voiced by Mark Hamill. That said, Joker whining about not having his electric car after putting down a deposit has got to be one of my favorite Joker moments has ever been in a series. That was the Harley cartoon, and if you haven't seen it, I won't spoil that scene. It's comedy gold, and is very fitting of, you know, animate, or, you know, like the old school purple suit wearing Joker, and just how detached he was mentally, while still sort of having some connection to everything. No, I agree, and Demon Scythe is saying they can do all the animated series they want, but live action, the Batman art can't be done to the same degree. No, you're correct. It's also comparing, for example, like a movie versus a series. Like, they had the Batman live action series. I can't remember what it was called. That was very recent. That, from my understanding, was pretty good. I don't know. I didn't personally see it. And I heard that was good, but like in a movie, you know, at the most you got like 3 hours to set up your story, you know, have meaningful contributions, and then wrap it up. And so that's kind of gets the whole thing of, you can't have like the slow build up to where, you know, this person's been like crap to each other for the whole series, and they finally have their upcoming moment and all that. You can't like build up to that moment. You only got 3 hours to deliver that. They have to have a far more simplified and nuanced plot that delivers very quickly. Versus like, you can think of those shows that had the series that, you know, the series went on for 3, 4, 5 years. And there was just this like slow, like, you'd have your main story arcs that go, but there's that one like back burner issue that was just kind of building and building and building, you know, season after season after season. And then you got to like season 5, and it finally came to a head. And like, you would get to that one episode and just be absolutely ready to see this happen. And a movie just can't do it. There's just not enough time. I didn't see the new Joker movie, so I couldn't tell you. Like I said, I already was pretty burnt out on superhero movies. Mostly, again, because I got to the point, like, I'm ready to see other characters. Like, expand the content I'm viewing. Stop recashing in the same story. And that's the reason why reboots piss me off so much. Is because, like, it'll be 90% of the same story, and they'll be like, but this one twist. But then you look at the entire rest of the story, and it doesn't matter. Like, the one twist, it just changes, like, one relationship dynamic, but otherwise, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I wish I could picture an example in the top of my head, but I can't remember, like, very specific. It's just kind of like the stuff where if they were to have, like, you know, if they were to have, like, Spider-Man, it's like, well, no, Spider-Man, like, became this because he got bit by this radioactive spider thing. And if they were to have like the one-off, it's like, no, 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 actually he was cursed. Well, is he still Spider-Man? Yeah. Does he still have the same abilities? Yeah. Does he still do the same thing? Yeah. Then what the hell's the point? Like, maybe you've introduced a new villain, which, cool, but, you know. It is fair that sometimes we need a remake. It's just kind of one of those things that, when there's too many remakes, it's kind of... Yeah. Or yeah, it's like, how many times can Batman's parents die? And don't get me wrong, the movie industry does it because people go and see it, so clearly they're doing something right if people still are going to see it. But for me, like, I would not be the target demographic getting in those movies. I'm like, I like original stories. I like the story to change once in a while. And not just this time Batman has a different car than that time, or this time Batman, or, you know, Bruce Wayne, not Batman, Bruce Wayne went into exile to learn, some type of secret martial arts that's superior to some other one, versus, you know, this other time, you know, he just stayed at the Wayne Manor and learned his martial arts from question mark. Look, we didn't get into it, he just knew it. He trained. Wink wink. And I'm not saying that's a problem, that the fact that he just showed up with these abilities, like, the assumption is he's super duper rich. He found trainers and all that kind of stuff that taught him stuff. Yeah, and so don't feel like just because I'm like, oh, I'm like tired of superhero movies. Like, again, if you're having fun with it, cool, you're doing it right. Just for me, a lot of the movies nowadays haven't really been doing much for me. Like with the comment on remakes, it's like I get that side. I personally, what I would love to see more, and I mentioned this earlier, is like I would rather they take what they have and expand on it. So like, again, okay, you followed Batman around, cool. Find, follow the villain around for one, follow like side characters around for another, and I know they've done some of that. It's just hard to be invested when, every third movie the Joker's a different character, every third movie the Batman, has a slightly different story arc because you've started him over. You're just kind of going, but, please. Follow Poison Ivy a while. Let me see Poison Ivy's angle. Like, I know they've done that in, like, the cartoons and that, but it's like, give me a movie that follows Poison Ivy as the main character, where we, see her, go from being this talented scientist to effectively becoming like a borderline eco-terrorist and doing all her thing. Like, tell me that story. Where, she's still the villain, but you're sympathetic to her situation as well. Where, you humanize the character. Instead of they are cartoonish villain C. I mean, Poison Ivy was present in it, but still centered around Batman and Robin doing their thing. Like, and I remember Batman forever. I remember the fiberglass car with all the holes in the side to show all sorts of weird lights and all that. that even watching it on camera, you could see like the car kind of bend and flex because it was just not a sound designed for a car, but was still cool nonetheless. But you get what I'm saying. I'm not someone who wants to hear the same story retold. Yeah. Yeah. My head just keeps going to Arnold Schwarzenegger doing Mr. Freeze. Can I look at the noms tab? You mean the noms? Excellent. Those are some noms. Just checking a couple things real fast. Just going on the Discord, making sure everything's cool. It all's cool. Yeah, I'm figuring our dinner here today is probably not going to be nearly as delicious looking as that. I mentioned before, we get these meal kits and like, there's some really good meal kits they have, but they take like 15, 20, 30 minutes of like actually being at the stove, cutting up veggies, doing all sorts of stuff, and they're good. But for streaming, they're like super non-starter because dinner comes up in the middle of the stream because they stream, 11-hour streams typically. And then the other kits we have, they take all of like 2-3 minutes to do because you just kind of chuck them in the microwave. They're kind of pre-prepared. And they're healthy and all that. Like, that part's fine. But they're a little underwhelming, if I'm being honest. It's just because it's all microwave food. It all has kind of that vaguely mush texture. Like just, I mean, shouldn't say mush. Everything is a soft texture. You don't get like, there's no crunch. There's no anything like that. So texture-wise, it's pretty dull. Hey, zombie, I thought you were dead. They basically made some beef ramen with some chicken stir-fry. Excellent. I don't know why, but reading chicken stir-fry makes me want fried chicken. And like that's not something on my normal go-to. Like I like fried chicken, but it's not like I just on a random Tuesday I'm like, I want some fried chicken. For whatever reason, I'm just like, actually, now that you mention it. Not Shane says, now I want fried chicken. So, Popeyes, that check's coming in the mail, right? Like that's still a thing, right? No? Not actually sponsored. I remember before, this is more YouTube than Twitch, and honestly television shows. I remember before we had requirements to disclose sponsorship, where you'd go on to like YouTube videos, and you had people who were very elegant about, pushing whatever they were clearly sponsored to do, and then you had the ones that were just like so absurd about it that, they'd be in the middle of whatever, like, they'd have some like animated thing on YouTube, and just in the middle it's like, Kentucky Fried Chicken, or whatever it was they're supporting, and you just kind of like, why was this scene here? And you're like, oh, this, like, literally they were paid to advertise was that this was this is product placement. Yeah. I like both of them. There's definitely times I want one over the other. Like, there's certain moves. Yeah. Zauerfish says, those requirements were always law in most countries. YouTubers just didn't know. I mean, fair. And there's lots of stuff, like, even if they knew, if it was just common practice on YouTube and it was a way to monetize, that's like, okay, well, if it's not being punished, who cares? It's just like here on Twitch that you still have people blasting music that is not DMCA safe. And just, you know... And they're like, yeah, but it's fine. Like, how often do people get banned for it or whatever? It's like, well, right, but you still are knowingly breaking the rules. And there is gray area there. Like, Twitch has a thing where, for your VOD and all that, it will replace your music track with DMCA safe music. And it's like, okay, well, Twitch has that tool, so sure, maybe they have some agreement. But it really does feel like Twitch has kind of created this gray area that eventually lawyers are going to crack down on Twitch. And when that happens, they're going to crack down on the streams who are doing it. Which is kind of weird, because it's like they're giving permission for the streamers to do that, but also making sure they hedge their bets kind of thing. Hey, you have yourself a good lurk there, Pankraru. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the lurk. Like, because I know I've talked to a few other streamers about it that they're like, oh hey, you know, you have this way you can play copyrighted music on stream and it's fine. Like Twitch has given you the means of doing that very specifically. I'm like, yeah, I get that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, because I genuinely don't know. I'm just expecting where you've got some big name streamers nowadays who are like, I'm just going to watch entire television shows and movies on stream, start to finish. That's like, there's going to be that, you know, the lawyers knocking on the door kind of thing. And then suddenly Twitch is going to start absolutely putting their foot down on DMCA because it's the only way they're going to keep, you know, really hefty lawsuits from the music industry and from the movie industry and so on and so forth from slapping them real hard. But they're going to have to do measures. So I'm completely expecting that to be a thing, because that's basically the exact same thing that happened on YouTube. Is DMCA wasn't meaningfully enforced in any way for a long time. I mean, it also didn't exist the whole time, but still. And then things got to the point that the music industry and them got, you know, into YouTube's business and whatnot. And now we have YouTube as it is now, where they crack down on DMCA pretty hard. And generally, DMCA's approach guilty until proven innocent. That you get your stuff taken down, and then you circle back and go, hang on, this was taken down incorrectly, you know, I have fair use, or, you know, you've mistaken, you know, my first 5 notes for their first 5 notes in their song, and misflagged, or even like the ones where it's like, I had 5 minutes of 5 seconds of silence in my VOD, and you flagged it as this song that has 5 seconds of silence. I'm pretty sure that doesn't reasonably qualify as a copyright violation. And sure, they might restore your video after the fact or whatever, but like, it doesn't matter, you know, damage is done at that point. So for me personally, I'm just like, alright, well I'm betting that's pretty soon we're going to see those crackdowns happen, and I just want to make sure my channel doesn't get knocked out as part of it. Because that'd be a crappy way for all this to end. Like, you're putting all the effort into making your channel take off, you're, you know, doing what you can and all that stuff, and then something that was considered a perfectly acceptable practice when you started, and then just one day they flip it on you without really notifying you in a meaningful, timeful manner, and then suddenly you've got, you know, your channel's taken offline or whatever. Or even if it's just, it's down for a week while you sort it out. Like, being down for a week when it comes to Twitch viewership is super bad for your channel's numbers. So it is one of those things that I just play in the air of caution. You know, it is kind of a thing. For those who don't, like, that's fine. Like, Twitch has provided means of playing copyrighted music and all that, so. Dark Strider cashing in some push-ups. And we also said, Kit says, is it just me, and I'm honestly not trying to be rude, or has Clear Rosewood been an objective for a while? Yeah, it has. Like, that's... So what we were doing, and I mean, it was actually Clear Riverside for the whole time. But yeah, that's kind of the way this works, though, is clearing a city in-game takes like a month or two-ish, and that's in-game time. Actually, probably longer than that. It takes a good couple months. So you will have the objective where it just sits there like that for 4, 5, 6 streams and doesn't change. At which point, then, you know, Rose will go down to the cleared, and then the next target will show up. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and do those push-ups, going to do that hydrate, and going to do that stretch, and I'll be right back. Oh no, you're good, Kit. And to be clear, like, we have had the Rosewood clear objective for probably what, 3, 4 streams, I would guess? No, probably 3 streams. Because I think the one before that was reach Rosewood, which is just basically to get to the point where we could sleep anywhere in town. Let me record those push-ups before I forget, because I will, and I have in the past. So only 3 more redemptions for push-ups this stream. So we're only a couple hours in here. Oh, it's already 9? Alright, my wife should be home any time now. Okay, so I still owe a stretch and hydrate. Sourfish is saying, speaking in numbers, I'm just curious, did adding a webcam have any meaningful impact on viewership or interactions? It's hard to say, Zauber, in all honesty. Like, my numbers are higher since it's been on, but it's also been higher kind of in line with the growth the channel's been seeing before I put the camera on. So, without something as a control to compare against, it's just gut check, yes, but honestly, don't know. But that's kind of the thing that's so hard with making a lot of decisions on your stream. Like, your stream is a unique thing. Your audiences are unique. Like, who specifically is tuning into your channel is going to have impacts on what type of conversations you have, what the expectations are, what type of content will and won't work on your channel, like what vibe your channel has is going to play into that. And so it's very difficult to have, like, there isn't a, Rual Storge 2 channel where I can A/B test where that channel does one thing, my channel does the other. It's just not a thing you can do. So while you do use a lot of data to try and inform decisions that, generally speaking, channels with webcams on perform better than channels without. Channels that are more engaging to chat generally perform better than channels that don't. Like, that data is sound. Like, how it actually handles, it's very difficult to get a metric. Because especially when you take in consideration, like, raids. Like, I was trying to figure out, it's like, okay, what is my slow day during the week? Like, what's my peak day during the week? Decide, like, okay, if I were to take days off, what would be the best day of the week to do that? Like, what's the day of the week that would be least negatively impacting on the channel type deal? But because of raids, there's no consistency. I mean, like, yesterday we had a raid of 100-something people, so we had like 200-something people in the channel at one point. That means my, like, Sunday numbers are completely cut off the wall. It's like you get raids on not all the time or anything. They kind of bounce all over the place. Some days you get a bunch of little raids, maybe a big raid, maybe no raids. And so it makes it very difficult to go, okay, was that because I made a decision that changed my channel? Oh no, wait, there was a raid. So now I have no way of knowing what my decision did, good, bad, or otherwise, versus the raid's influence. It honestly makes it actually pretty difficult to, like, that's part of why I get so indecisive on decisions is normally I can sit there and go, okay, well, I can look at data and go, all right, based on the data I'm seeing, this is probably the correct decision, or this is probably a good decision. I shouldn't say correct. That implies there's, only one right, only one wrong, and usually it's, this is the better decision than that one. There's just so rare you find data that you can 100% point at. I haven't heard my wife get home yet. But I also wasn't, like, because normally what'll happen is when I start noticing, I'll start listening more carefully to see if I hear the garage, because that way I can run down, meet her home and everything. Alright, we're still just working on clearing up the town. Things have been really smoothing out. This whole area used to be just a sea of bodies. As you can see, we've still got skeletons floating around here a little bit from the ones that haven't quite decayed. But generally speaking, the body count is pretty low up here. That's because the numbers have been getting whittled down. So we do like to see all this. Let's see. For the raid thing, you could say made a contact with some other streamer that likes your content, decides to give you a raid. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not saying it's a positive or a negative, but like, for example, if I'm trying to compare, say, like last Sunday to this Sunday, because days of the weeks have different amount of people show up. So I'm like, okay, well, how much did, like, help hurt or otherwise having the webcam on? Like, what impact did it have? Because if it, like, didn't do anything meaningful, then maybe I just, maybe I wouldn't bother. Like, if it's a bunch of effort and I'm getting no return on investment, it's like, okay, well, then I should just not worry about it. But because you have the raid one, like, you have the first Sunday, you didn't have a big raid, you just had a couple little raids before you had the webcam, and then you have a big raid the next one, it's like, well, now I have, like, there isn't a fair comparison I can make. Like, you can go, well, leading up to the raid that happened, but there's also, like, when you watch the day, like, you can go up with that. And then on top of that, we have, like, Elden Rings drop, so you're going to have a bunch of people who are going out of their way to watch Elden Rings. You're also going to have a bunch of people who are going away from channels they would normally watch because those channels are playing Elden Rings for the time being. It makes it so hard to, get information that's, like, it can be an educated guess kind of information, but really past that, there's a whole lot you can't figure out that you do have to just gut check a lot of stuff. And I certainly can gut check stuff. I much prefer having data to lean on. But when you know your data's no good, then it's like your data's not worthless, but it's not particularly valuable. Alright, go get these two that are over here by the garage. I'm gonna guess my wife's home, because usually she's been home for like 10 minutes by now. Once I kill these zombies, I'm gonna run downstairs, welcome her home. If she isn't jumping the gun and make, well, I mean, not jumping. If she isn't like making dinner happen, I'll hop down and get that going, which will only take a couple minutes. Shouldn't be terribly long. There's a good chance she's already started. I'm gonna go down and just basically carry my food up, kind of thing, because she'll already be done. We'll see. So I'm gonna get back to the car. I'm gonna pause the game. And at that point, you know, if you've been sitting here the entire time, you haven't stood up, you haven't grabbed anything to eat or drink, you know, you haven't stretched, you know, not done any of those things, probably good to take a moment, you know, use a restroom, whatever you gotta do. Anyways, so I'm going to step away for just a couple minutes, you know, check see if she's home, welcome her home, figure out dinner, all that kind of stuff. And I'll be back very soon. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. And thank you for everyone who has been tuning in, who's been lurking, who's been chatting, following, subscribing, doing the bits, the hosts, the donos, the raids, and all that good stuff. It all helps, and I really do appreciate it. Alright, so I will be back in just a couple minutes. Okay, and I am back with food. And also a text message that was clearly meant for someone else because they're like, long time no see, did you receive the red wine that we sent? I'm like, I'm not answering this. One, no, I didn't receive any red wine, and two, what? I mean, that said, like, if they knew me, they'd know I prefer whites, but still, you know. Yeah, the only reason I don't do that is so there's a lot of stuff when you realize with these kinds of things, when you get a thing that's just clearly not meant for you, those can be the groups who do like spam and scam callers, that what they'll do is they'll send out a random text like that. And it's not like there's a human being behind this, by the way. Like they'll just have a thing, they'll mass send out texts just like on a schedule. And then if you respond in any way, they mark your number as like, okay, that's a good number, that's got a human being behind it. So in the future when they do their scam and spam calls, they know it's a good number. Like it's super annoying, but you just can't use phones in a meaningful level anymore. Like for that type of stuff. Like it's even almost the point like, okay, you know, your dentist or doctor's office or whatever, it's like, alright, let me know what number you will be contacting with so I can add you to my contacts so I know it's not garbage. But I can't tell you how many times I've had stuff that seems legit. Oh, Sourfish are saying you can't do that in the US? I mean, you're not allowed to do that in the US, but it still happens in the US. Like, it's against the law, and if you can manage to pin them down. What's the limitation that prevents that nowadays in the US, if you don't mind me asking? Because don't get me wrong, I'm not a telco expert. Yeah. Because, I mean, I probably get, in the typical day, 4 or 5 calls that hit my phone that are, you know, they're flagged as scams immediately. That before, you know, my telco had, like, a proper, you know, proper scam filtering, all that kind of stuff enabled. Just all that happens. I get texts all the time that get flagged as scam and spam and stuff like that. Like, that's all the time that happens. Like, I probably have several hundred that were on the phone still from where it's flagged them. That's a big part of it. They set up these companies that do this kind of crap. And by the time people catch up, it doesn't matter much. Gotcha. And it wouldn't surprise being in Florida if the strictness was basically negligible. Yeah, and I may not have the technical details on how it works anymore, like maybe that's how it used to work. But yeah, I've had so many times that I'll have like some unsolicited text that just nothing happens, and then suddenly I'm just getting blown up by spam calls the moment I respond to one. I'm just like, alright, never mind. So I've just got the policy at this point, if I don't know who is on the other end of my phone, I won't pick up. Not unless I'm specifically expecting a call that I know is going to come from a number I don't know, like I put out a, like, ask for a quote for something or whatever. That's like, okay, I don't know what number it's going to come from, so yeah. Just waiting for this. Tender Cookie says, I hate scammers with a burning passion. Agreed. Gore says, the entire business model revolves around profits with minimal actual overhead, using IVRs, internal value. I don't know what IVR is for the abbreviation there. The risk is usually worth the rewards. Yeah. Yeah, and like one office I had been into, like for example, the office next to ours,